we're all part of a union that we don't even realize, and it's called being a United States citizen. That itself is a union that has absolute power if we would collectivize and use it like that, but we just don't. Eventually, Trump's going to die, and this whole thing is going to collapse. What then? Are you still not going to talk to people who voted for Trump? Are we talking about generations of this divide existing in America? If that's the case, this country is screwed. So yeah, I think to me, like, that's the real problem we're facing, is like much bigger and much darker than just like Republican, Democrat. It's like there's a ruling class of these billionaires who own all these giant tech companies that are restructuring, I mean, not just American, like human civilization in a model that will put them on top forever.
No president has ever botched the first 100 days more badly than Donald Trump has botched it.
My heart is full today, full of love for our country.
This will truly be the golden age of America.
Est-ce qu'on peut encore se parler en Amérique en 2025 ? Je parle pas ici de débat télévisé, je parle de s'asseoir en face de son père et de sa mère, deux personnes qui sont persuadées que Trump, le président actuel des États-Unis, est en train de sauver le pays, et de continuer à leur parler. 1 heure, toutes les semaines, depuis 3 ans et demi. Micro ouvert, même quand ils disent des horreurs, même quand ça fait mal. Chad Kultgen, la personne avec qui je me suis entretenue cette semaine, fait exactement ça. Avec sa sœur, il co-anime le podcast The Necessary Conversation, la conversation nécessaire donc, un podcast dans lequel ils parlent de politique, de Donald Trump, de ce pays qui se fracture, avec leurs 2 parents. 2 boomers MAGA jusqu'au bout des ongles. C'est brutal, c'est intime, et c'est peut-être une des choses les plus importantes que j'ai écoutées cette année. Dans cet épisode, on parle donc de rupture, de liens familiaux qu'on tente de sauver, de ce que ça coûte aussi de ne pas abandonner, et de ce que ça dit de l'Amérique sous Trump 2.0. Vous écoutez ou regardez Chroniques Américaines, ce podcast et cette newsletter que j'ai pensé pour vous raconter les États-Unis depuis l'intérieur. Ah oui, et moi c'est Anne-Fleur Andrely, je suis journaliste franco-américaine et je vous parle aujourd'hui depuis le Colorado. C'est parti. Can you tell me the birth story of that podcast? Because some people may think it came from the recent election, but it's actually been around for quite some time.
Yeah, we've been doing it for 3 years just about.
Okay.
The birth of it was my sister and I, who are both extremely liberal, had not really in any substantive way talked to our parents in a long time, really. Not since somewhere in Obama's second term. We just kind of became a family that would go back and visit on Christmases and birthdays and stuff, but not say much, and just sit in the living room as my dad would scream at us while he was watching Fox News. And my parents were getting older, and I was not okay with the idea that they were going to die effectively on these kind of terrible terms with my sister and I, where we didn't really have a relationship. And that was all because of politics. They're huge Trump supporters, and like I said, my sister and I are not. So in my life, the way I keep people close, or the people who are most important to me, I'm working on some kind of a creative project with all of them. My background before this podcast is as a TV writer and a movie writer and a novelist. And I'm working kind of constantly with all my best friends on various creative projects. So I thought, what's the best way to keep my parents close to me, or at least force them to engage in a conversation with me every week? I'll start a podcast because I like doing podcasts. I have a couple others that I do as well about reality TV and whatever. But so I got with my mom and I was like, would you be down to do this? People may hate you. People will hate you. Are you going to be okay with that? She said yes. My dad then got jealous that he wasn't on the podcast, and he was like, I want to be on that show too. And then my sister agreed to do it, and we've been doing it now for about 3 years.
That's amazing. So it was an easy-ish persuasion, to convince them to join?
Yeah, it was.
I would have expected it to be the hardest part.
No, my mom has always kind of wanted to be famous in one way or another, and she perceives this as her opportunity to do that. And my dad, like I said, he just gets jealous if he's not kind of the center of attention. So he got sucked into it.
That's so interesting. So you use this as a way to basically stay connected with your family. You said that you guys were not talking, and it was mostly due to politics. Did something happen? Like, was there a harsh conversation, or it kind of?
No,
and if I'm too personal, you tell me. But
no, of course. I don't know that there was like one conversation exactly that I can pinpoint, but I just remember sometime during Obama, going back to visit my parents for some birthday or whatever it might have been, and just sitting on their couch and my dad screaming in my face about how stupid I was and you don't understand and Obama's selling us out and all this type of shit. And so all those visits just became me and my sister just like sitting there silently as my dad would yell at us for no reason, like unprovoked. It wasn't like we were trying to engage in a conversation with him about politics. It was just 5 minutes in the door. That's what was happening.
Wow.
And my mom had his back. She, her views aligned with his. She wasn't as aggressive in her expression of those views. But it just became kind of the default mode of our family was that there was no real conversation about anything. It was only and ever just my dad screaming at us about whatever his right-wing views were. And I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people are experiencing similar things in America. I get the DMs every day about it. But so for me, it was just a matter of forcing my parents to engage in a conversation for an hour a week, which we have not done in years until we started doing this podcast. And thank you. Whether it's helping or not, it's helping our relationship as a family for sure. I don't think I'm like changing my dad's mind about politics. I don't think I'm changing my mom's mind about politics, although maybe there's hope there. But primarily what it has helped us with is just get in that routine of like talking to each other again. Even though we're talking about politics, the fact that it is a mandated weekly podcast appearance means they have to interact with us. We have to interact with them. And in our family, there are multiple times where my sister or myself, we would do something that my parents didn't approve of. And we would get a literal kind of silent treatment from them for months. That can't happen now because we have to do this podcast every week. So I think in one way or another, it's been helpful just in terms of the just a general capacity to maintain communication.
That's brilliant. I was gonna ask why hit record. So initially, it's a family project. It's connecting, it's restoring communication within the four of you. Basically.
Oh, of course. The politics are almost like, I know the whole show is about us talking about political stuff, but that's almost it's incidental. The only reason that it's that way is because that's all my parents will talk about.
Right.
I'd be happy to talk about anything else. I try to insert some things into the podcast every once in a while, talking about, metaphysical stuff, philosophical stuff, whatever. And that doesn't usually go well with them. Yeah, almost immediately every
your
time.
mom tries with the. So I've never seen it in writing, so I don't know what the word is. The ditties, the thing at the beginning.
Ditties, yeah.
Yeah. What does that stand for actually?
It's DITTY. It means like a short song or poem, basically.
Okay, never heard the word. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I was wondering, what are your conversations like off mic? Has the podcast made things more charged, heavy? I don't know if you can say charged in English, at home, or somehow diffused some of the tensions? Are you able to talk off mic, or is this your primary mode of communication right now with your parents?
I don't know if it's it's probably, in terms of volume, it's the most that we talk, but we talk through text and DMs and stuff all the time. And that conversation that happens outside the podcast is never about politics. It's like we have distilled down the kind of political animosity that we have toward one another and put it in the show. And that's where it lives now. So it doesn't really infect the rest of our relationship as a family. Yeah.
Have you found yourself getting more radical in tone, or on the contrary, more nuanced through these discussions to make sure actually that the conversation happens, the necessary conversation?
I guess I consider myself left-leaning, but my views are more, I won't say anarchist necessarily, but I think the entire system is completely broken, left and right. I think there are massive problems on both sides, which is not to say that they are equal in any way. Like anybody who voted for Trump, I have a very hard time accepting the ideology behind that at all. Like I there's a pretty hard line right down the center, and I don't know that you can find, some people talk about finding the people who are more moderate on both sides, and that's where we have to start the healing. It's like that line, if you voted for Donald Trump, there is no center in my mind. But all that said, I don't know that the podcast has changed my political views in any way. What it has done is it has opened me up to a side of the left that I guess I knew intellectually that it existed, but I had never experienced it. And that is the people on the left who are sending me death threats. It's like, I'm on your side. Oh, yeah. I get stuff from like the right for sure, but I also get stuff from the left, a kind of like hardcore contingent
rationale?
that I'm giving my parents a platform for hate, and therefore I should also be killed, burn in hell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's strange to see it because it's like, I voted for Kamala Harris. I want all the same things the left wants.
Yeah.
Literally, why I'm doing the podcast to some degree is to expose like what I believe are very generic attitudes of MAGA voters. I think there's a lot of people on the left that don't really understand it. If you don't have somebody who's MAGA in your life, I don't think you really get how they think, what they feel, etc. So by just kind of putting that in the podcast, in my mind, it is a leftist kind of move to do that. It's like exposing it to some degree. Yeah. Not in a bad way, not in like, oh, look at these pieces of shit. I think we all disagree with the attitudes, but it's more about like, we need to be aware that these attitudes exist. Yeah. I think ignoring them, cutting them off, saying like, this shouldn't have a platform. That's where you start to get into this weird, dangerous territory of like, now these attitudes are just lurking, forced into the darkness until they explode in like a January 6th riot type thing.
So actually that brings me to the name of the podcast, The Necessary Conversation. How would you explain the name of the podcast itself to some people who have not listened to it? I took a look. Did you know? I mean, I'm sure you know you have a Reddit about the podcast.
I haven't looked at that. Oh God! I
It's
try to stay off Reddit.
It's really neat. Reddit is a whole wide word for me because we don't have that in France, and it's like always so enlightening. But you have a lot of people listening from abroad, and because some people are like, oh, it's like it's hard sometimes to listen, you know, to see how disconnected we are from one another in the same country, and I think that's part of the huge value that your podcast is bringing, but it's also a bunch of people, notably in Europe, saying this is helping me understand how we got to where we got in America today, and I find it pretty interesting. So, sorry, I didn't mean to answer for you. Can you tell me?
No problem. The name is like, it kind of has a dual meaning, or at least it works on two levels for me anyway. One is that like, it is a conversation necessary for my family, right, so that we can actually stay in communication and actually be a family. But the secondary kind of meaning, or the broader implication of it, is that I think this conversation is necessary for America for sure, but maybe even kind of globally, because there's this attitude now, and it is largely fueled by social media and cable news, who are like, they profit off of isolating certain ideologies and feeding you only what you want to hear, and telling you to not even acknowledge that the other viewpoint exists. But we are now in a spot in this country where you've got MAGA voters and you've got everybody on the left. They are not communicating across that divide. Yep. And so eventually Trump's going to die, and this whole thing is going to collapse. What then? Are you still not going to talk to people who voted for Trump? Are we talking about generations of this divide existing in America? If that's the case, this country is screwed. Like, I think the conversation between the left and the right has to happen. And I'm not saying that it has anything to do with like changing somebody's mind or proving they're wrong or admitting guilt or any of that shit. It's just about acknowledging that like the people on the other side of this are people just like you are, and that we are all susceptible to corporate media propaganda, which like locks us in our own little corners of this fight and doesn't allow us to see the other side as human beings. That attitude is like why we are where we are, I think. Just my 2 cents, you know.
So do you think, like, what are the other... Nowadays, I feel like America's never been so divided, right? I'm not bringing anything new. I mean, you know that. But do you think Americans across ideological lines have other ways right now of communicating? I don't know if there is the desire to communicate, but do they have the means to communicate in good faith and talk to each other?
I don't know. It's hard to say. You know, I have, especially in Los Angeles, I don't really have any friends that are MAGA. I don't even know anybody who voted for Trump. So it's hard to say that like other people are communicating across that line in any meaningful way. I certainly know that I have friends, I mean, personal friends of mine who like think me doing this podcast with my parents is in some way detrimental to the overall kind of ideology of America or whatever. And these are my friends. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if that conversation is happening. It doesn't seem like it to me.
Yeah.
Because you watch, I don't know, I guess it's getting a little more lax. If you watch cable news, sometimes you'll see right-wing people on left-wing channels, and you'll see left-wing people on right-wing channels now. There's a little bit of like crossover there. But, you know, is it happening in any real way? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Across the people, I think that's what makes your podcast so precious as well. Do you think the polarization is like the symptom or the cause of the current political climate?
I think it's designed. I think it's the goal of
the goal.
Corporate media. You know, I don't know how deep you get into like talking about, you know, Peter Thiel or any of these kind of evil billionaires who have, do you know, like Palantir, that corporation that Peter Thiel runs? So, you know, their stated goal is basically to take all the data that the U.S. government has, use that to create a database, and restructure American culture into the stratified system that puts them on top as kind of these like techno monarchs of the whatever the new regime is going to be. Part of doing that is isolating everybody into their little pockets so that we can't talk. Because if the right and the left, the general working class people, were able to cross that divide and realize the war we're fighting against each other, this ideological culture war, is completely fake. It is literally invented by Peter Thiel and guys like him to keep us fighting each other so that we are not aware that they're the actual enemy. They're the one controlling all of this. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a byproduct, a symptom, the cause. I think it's the goal of the people who control the most powerful companies in the world and have the most money.
That's interesting. And terrifying.
But yeah, they're succeeding. Like that, the real terrifying part is that, especially with like Palantir, for those who don't know, Palantir is an AI company that was created by Peter Thiel and a bunch of other billionaires. They, in many cases, the high-ranking officials of that company have done interviews where they're basically like, yeah, freedom and democracy don't mix. We need to enslave people. And they're doing it. And that company has government contracts all in the United States government. Like every department is running Palantir software. The DOD, the FBI, the CIA, every military branch. It's insane. And our government seemingly is either on board with that, like in league with them, which I think Trump and many of the Republicans are, or the Democrats seemingly don't understand what's happening. Yeah. Even though these guys are openly saying, this is what we're doing, we're taking all of the government's data and using it against you. It's wild to me. So yeah, I think to me, like that's the real problem we're facing, is like much bigger and much darker than just like Republican, Democrat. It's like there's a ruling class of these billionaires who own all these giant tech companies that are restructuring, I mean, not just American, like human civilization in a model that will put them on top forever.
And do you think this is going to be replicated around the world? We've seen some of the Trumposphere, I don't know, Trumposphere, I don't know how you say that, trying to influence. It was the elections in Germany a few months ago. In the UK, Elon Musk is very involved. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly trying to do it all over the world. You've seen a rise in populist leaders everywhere in all countries. But I think the long kind of arc of this, if you look at human history, these types of things, like imposing your will on a population to make them subservient to you, that usually doesn't work. It may work for a little while, but there's going to be some kind of a revolution, and the people at the top of that usually get toppled. So I think it might work for a minute, and it's hard to argue against like the richest people in the world exerting control over all these systems, political, technological, ideological, whatever, because money is what dominates our society globally. It's what controls everything. Right. So if you have more of it than anybody, you can kind of do what you want. But I think in the end, it won't work just because it never does. I think like at a personal level, freedom and kind of fairness always seem to like we're moving in that direction always, even if it seems like for the moment we have a little bit of a setback.
I'm wondering, you've been doing this for 3 something years, you said at the beginning. Do you feel more hopeful than you were 3 years ago? And are we talking about more hopeful about the strength of your family, the bonds of your family, or about the political climate, or about where the country is going? How has your perspective basically shifted, if it has, if maybe it hasn't?
Yeah. I mean, we started this during I believe it was year 2 of Biden.
Right.
And it looked at that time. Yeah, exactly. Right around there. You know, just thinking back to that, like I was very enthusiastic that the whole Trump era, the whole MAGA thing was over. Yeah. We all thought that, right?
Yeah.
And then we led into this last election, which was just a disaster from top to bottom for the Democrats, who made so many errors, so many mistakes. But I don't know that I'm like, it's hard to say that you're more hopeful as we're living under this regime right now in America that is, I mean, these ICE raids, this is like Gestapo type stuff, and we're seeing it every day. We're closer now to living in like a Nazi Germany than we've ever been in my lifetime. So it's difficult to say that I'm hopeful, because it's hard to find hope in the face of this and knowing that we have at least 3 more years of this. Although this Epstein stuff, maybe that'll take him out. Who knows? But I'm put right back in that mindset of his first term, where I was up every night till 3 a.m. watching CNN and MSNBC, just waiting like, oh God, are they going to find the thing? Is this going to be the thing that gets him out of there? And I know that's a fool's errand now. So I'm just kind of like, whatever, wake me up when he's actually out of office. All that said, I think the response to him has, from the left, I mean, and from like protests and AOC and Bernie Sanders doing their No Oligarchs tour and all of that, there's been like a pretty strong response in opposition to him. That gives me some hope, some enthusiasm that there's still some pieces of the machine are like working correctly and pushing back. He's suffered a lot of legal losses in the court system. Whether those are going to be enforced or not and who is going to enforce them is another question. But I do think there are pieces of opposition that are happening to the whole Trump thing, to the Project 2025, Peter Thiel, all these guys that, they seem to be holding. Shit is very bad, but it's not completely gone yet. And that, I mean, if you can find hope in anything, I guess that has to be it.
We need it.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a question. I'm getting a tiny bit off topic for a second, but I mean off topic compared to the original focus of the conversation. But a question that comes back a lot to me in this podcast, Chroniques Américaines, American Chronicles, is why aren't people like on the street? Now, for context, most of my audience is from France. We love to do revolution, to burn tires, to take over the streets.
You guys know how to do it, for sure.
So that may also explain. But I know that I just came back from a few weeks back home in France, and that's the big question people have. It's like, how far are they gonna let him go? Why aren't people blocking the country, to force some reaction?
Hello?
We don't have the same history here. It's very different. But do you have a take on that you'd like to share with the audience? A lot of things are happening, but not in the same way than people may do it in Europe.
I remember, I don't know when this was, a couple of years ago, maybe a little more now. I remember seeing a story about, it was, if I remember right, farm workers were on strike in France and they sprayed down the government buildings with liquid shit.
Yeah.
I was like, this is how we do it. Where is our liquid shit spray? God, that was so funny to me. But I mean, France is like, protest is like baked into who you are as a people. It just isn't here like that. And there's a lot to be said. Like in America, the consumer culture is kind of like the predominant homogenous culture here.
Okay.
I think. Like more than any religion or political ideology, it's like we are consumers.
That's true.
And as long as the Amazon drones keep delivering me my shit and I can watch Netflix. It's
not impacting me directly.
Exactly. So, Exactly. And there's enough kind of like creature comforts that are easily available at a moderately kind of price point that I think there's incentive. And I think the people at the top of this know this. And that's why Jeff Bezos is shaking hands with Donald Trump and doing what he wants, because he's part of the machine that keeps us at home.
Right.
That's like, are you really going to go out to these protests? Are you really going to go out here? Here's a new episode of Baby Yoda or whatever the fucking thing is. And I know it's like, it's shitty to say, but like that, I think is the truth of it. Americans are, they're very like individualistic in terms of your sense of self, your sense of your place in society. And it's very rarely about a group. And if it is, it's only about a group in opposition to another group. So like MAGA versus the left or whatever. We are protesting. I mean, there have been big protests since Trump came into office. The No Kings protests, whenever that was, about a month ago, I guess, you know. A lot of people are turning out, but it's not like in France when you guys do like general work stoppage protests. It's just like, nobody's going to fucking work today. Go fuck yourselves unless we all get a raise or an extra day off or whatever the case may be. That will never happen here because people are terrified to lose their job in an economy where we've got to pay for our own health insurance, where if your boss can fire you for any reason, you have to work overtime without pay, all these terrible work conditions. And there's a culture of fear around losing that thing that gives you ability to have that comfort, to pay for your Netflix, to buy your Amazon, to order your Uber Eats. And I think that largely, it keeps people in, you know? It's like, this will pass. It's not really affecting me. But I agree. If we had a little more Frenchness in us, I think this could be over quickly, you know? Like if everybody in America just said, we're not going to work until Donald Trump is out of office, I guarantee you those guys who own those billion-dollar companies, like Jeff Bezos, who essentially has a slave wage workforce that makes his company run, if they all said, we're not coming into work tomorrow, Bezos would be on the phone immediately. What the fuck are you doing, dude? You got to fix this, you know.
It's interesting. We're very different. Of course, it's not a judgment, but it's a question. Like, how far are we going to let everything
absolutely.
go?
I have the same question constantly. The idea, like, one of my other podcasts, I talk about reality TV, The Bachelor specifically, but a lot of dating shows. And I secretly train players to infiltrate that show and, like, play a game of it, basically.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm always telling them, like, the players have the power. If all of the players on like The Bachelor came together and basically told the producers, hey, none of us are going home. If one of us does, we all leave and you don't have a show, you could take complete control of that show. The same is true in any situation like that. That's why unions work for collective bargaining and all that. You know, it's we're all part of a union that we don't even realize, and it's called being a United States citizen. That itself is a union that has absolute power if we would collectivize and use it like that, but we just don't.
I want to talk about the emotional cost of the conversation.
Sure.
Has making this podcast cost you anything or something personally? Besides buying a mic?
No, it hasn't. My sister and I grew up with my dad as our father, so it's like we're kind of immune to all of the insults and the nasty stuff he says to us. Yeah, basically. And I really view it as this may just be my own personal kind of objective view of reality kind of creeping in here, but I don't really actually think any of this is real. And so for me, I just kind of look at... Yeah, exactly. To me, it's just like watching a sitcom or something.
Yeah,
you know?
this is
I can be
just a long season, not the best season of America, but...
This might be the one where America gets canceled.
Yeah. What would you say to a French listener, since most of them are, or a European listener who hears your podcast and thinks, how can anyone like have this conversation, still believe this? Or like, what do you answer actually to these people who are sending you death threat? I don't know if you do address them, but for giving a platform to the opposite view across the political aisle.
I don't really address these people if they DM me mean shit. I just don't answer back.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, to answer that specific thing, like, should I be giving a platform to my dad and my mom who are MAGA? It's like, I just don't agree personally with the idea of silencing any voice.
Right.
I don't know what the benefit in that is. I understand totally our podcast and listening to people on the deep MAGA side say whatever they're going to say. I understand that is not for everybody. And I'm not asking everybody to watch our show. If you get some value out of it, if it's helpful to you to either see how MAGA thinks, or maybe it represents a relationship you have in your own life with a family member or a friend or whatever, that's great. And that's who that podcast is for. And please tune in if you enjoy it. If you don't, all you have to do is never watch it. And that's totally fine too,
okay.
you know? Yeah. But like in terms of a platform, or thinking that in some way, me putting this conversation into the world is contributing to, you know, every bad thing that's happening in America. It's like Donald Trump is president. Mark Zuckerberg owns Facebook. Jeff Bezos owns Amazon. Elon Musk owns Twitter. Those are the people who are corrupting the platforms and actually controlling all of the shit. You know, our little podcast that has like, I think we're getting like 20,000 people roughly will watch an episode of our show. I don't know that that's doing much actual damage to society. You know, that's my take on it. Yeah. Obviously, you know, everybody's free to feel how they want to feel. But the bottom line to me is, I think it is detrimental to society to hide these attitudes. I think it is actually helpful to expose them. But again, that's just my take on it. Like, everybody's entitled to their opinion, obviously. Of course. And we don't all have to agree.
And do you know actually who's mostly listening to you guys, or listening or watching, because the show is on YouTube? Do you know, like, is it a lot of people actually who have relationships in their life with someone who's thinking very differently than them, who's having a hard time staying in touch or connecting or keeping the relationship alive, or I don't know. Do you know anything about your audience, basically?
Not really, to be honest. Like, I know kind of like where they are in the world. It's mostly Americans, but people from all over the world do listen to it. But I don't know. Like, I get DMs, I would say maybe 10 or so a day from people who are saying, yes, I have a relationship just like this. Watching this helps me kind of navigate my own issues, et cetera, et cetera. But like I said, I also get probably that many a day saying, I'm a horrible piece of shit and need to burn in hell. So it could be a split audience. There could be like people who are hate watching it and people who are watching it to try and glean some kind of information or, you know, helpful kind of tactics to dealing with people and having that conversation in their own life. But I can't be sure. I don't know the exact numbers.
That's so interesting. And are people mostly in the US?
Yeah, mostly in the US. Canada, we have a decent amount. The UK, really everywhere all through Europe is kind of like, I was surprised by that. There's like a decent sized audience in Europe.
Do you think people can be, I'm going to use a cult word, like deprogrammed in a way? Yeah. Or do you think deprogrammation is a thing and it can actually happen for... Yeah? 100%.
I mean, that was one of the first questions I ever asked my mom, and I will revisit that question from time to time. Do you think you're in a cult? And of course, no, even though they obviously are. I've read books about cult deprogramming. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. And part of the podcast, like really the basic premise of it, is one of the most foundational pieces of trying to get somebody out of a cult, which is maintaining contact with them without trying to pull them out of the cult. It's just about maintaining that relationship so that they are not completely isolated into the cult itself, so that you're a tether to them back to like normalcy, the real world, potentially even who they were before the cult. And so a big part of the podcast is just that. It's just simply for an hour being present with my parents so that they're not, you know, sucked into Fox News and Newsmax 24 hours a day without some tether back to the real world. But yeah, I'm hopeful that my mom can be pulled out of this. My dad, I don't know about that one. But my mom, every once in a while, I see a little glimpse of like, oh shit, there's the person she was before Trump.
Last question for you, Chad. If the podcast had to end tomorrow, what would you want people to take away from this whole experience, from all the content that you guys have created, this conversation that you've made available to the public?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully just some kind of an understanding that even though people on the opposite side of whatever ideology we're talking about, political, religious, whatever, even though they may say things that are absolutely vile, which my dad does every episode, still that guy, my dad, is my dad. He is a person in this world. He has helped my sister and I for better or worse, I suppose, grow into the adults we are. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also, I try to get in this in the podcast, but it's hard to get my dad to go down this road. he did not like grow up in a very easy life as a kid. You know, he had his own shit to deal with, and that generation is not good at dealing with shit. So he's never going to deal with it. And that has warped who he is. There are things that are like so far outside of his control, circumstantially, that I think have contributed to his attitude, his susceptibility to propaganda, his susceptibility to this specific MAGA ideology, that I have sympathy for him, you know? I feel like he's a victim in this, honestly. And I know it doesn't come across that way on the podcast because all the nasty shit he says, but that's how like I view them. And I think that has been a very helpful way for me to see it, is that like they are victims to this larger kind of corporate greed machine that is just preying on their inability to discern what is true in propaganda from what is false, their inability to understand modern social media technology and what is real and what is not. They are designing products to prey on people just like my dad, and it's working. And so I'm like, how can I help him? That really is what I hope anybody would take away from this, is that like the people who are in the MAGA cult are not necessarily there because they believe those ideologies, but maybe because they are victims of somebody literally trying to suck them in.
Which is even more terrifying. Thank you, Chad.
Yes, I know, it is.
Oh my goodness. So to my original question, can Americans still talk to each other under Trump 2.0? What's our current conclusion? I'm sure this response will evolve over time, and that's the hope.
It's hard to say yes in any meaningful way. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a bunch of videos now. It's kind of like a subgenre on YouTube where it'll be like one super liberal person or one super MAGA person sitting in a circle of people with opposed viewpoints. And those people will get to come up and have like 2 minutes to debate them. And this is supposed to be them, you know, talking across the divide. But it really
more
just,
like a trap.
yeah, exactly. It only kind of serves to reinforce whatever your preconceived notion is going into that. But I haven't seen a lot of like anything really anywhere of people trying to have a conversation across that line. And it's a hard conversation to have because the line is so stark. It's like I was saying earlier in this. There are like far right people, there are far left people, and they can both be very antagonistic. They can both be, mean, quite frankly. Then you have more the middle, which are people like in the middle left and people in the middle right. Those people, though, although they may have more in common in terms of the severity of their ideology, they don't have anything in common across that voting line. If you voted for Trump, I don't think anybody who didn't is ever going to be able to have like a regular conversation with you. That is such a huge chasm. It's not just like, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. It's a different thing. Much
deeper, yeah.
He's like Hitler. I mean, we're all seeing that. And if you voted for Hitler, it's like, that's a hard thing to ever walk back or have people kind of have a cordial conversation with you about it. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, can the conversation really happen in a real way? I mean, it's happening in my family to some degree, but it's because we're family. I think that is like where it has to start. Because you kind of walk
away, right?
You can. I get plenty of DMs from people telling me, go no contact. You'll be better off for it. You know, let these people die. And I'm just like, I can't do that personally. It's just not how I'm wired. But I think it makes it easier to attempt the conversation if it's a family member or a good friend or whatever. And maybe that's where it has to start for everybody. I don't know.
That is so interesting. Thank you so much, Chad, for spending this time with me.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was really interesting. I'm a big fan of the podcast, although sometimes it's painful to listen or to watch, I'll be honest.
Yes.
But I'll add the link to the podcast if you guys want to listen to it in the description of this episode. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.